Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about a new NIL deal that just came out of Utah that is a little bit more restrictive than some other ones out there, but let's get into some recruiting talk. The 2025 recruiting cycle is well underway. There are a ton of guys that are already committed. There are a ton of guys that are starting to heat up towards a commitment, setting some official visit dates over the summer, which is the crazy time for recruiting. But got to get you all primed. There is a ton of really, really talented guys in this cycle, and we're going to start on the offensive side of the ball because breaking down everyone in this class in one segment would be near impossible. But the Under Armour Next Tour is a tour that goes around to different major cities in the U.S. and shows off some of the best high school talent in those cities. So currently in Dallas, one of the most talent-rich places in the country, and a place that a lot of teams look at when they're trying to recruit kids. So a lot of new news coming out. So I thought I would get y'all up to date. And let's start with the team that is setting the pace in recruiting overall, but especially on the offensive side of the ball in 2025. The LSU Tigers are cooking in every sense of the word. Bryce Underwood is where it all starts, the best quarterback in the country, the best player in the country. Coming down to Baton Rouge from Belleville, Michigan. Obviously, tons of teams are going to keep pushing for this guy. He is absolutely special in every sense of the word. Michigan is obviously, his hometown team, the team that will be pushing for him the hardest. But for right now, LSU has him, and it looks like he is pretty locked in, or as locked in as you can be this early on in the process. Another guy on the LSU group is DeCorian Moore, who is the top wide receiver in the class, number 3 player in the country. Committed to the Bayou Bengals from Duncanville, Texas, a remarkable program out in Dallas that is doing just incredible things over the last couple of years. Texas, Ohio State, and Oregon are really going to be the teams that are going to push to the very, very end for more. I saw he set up visits to Texas and I believe Texas A&M as well early on in June. So two teams to definitely watch there. There is going to be a ton of guys going after DeCorian Moore because he's an absolute game changer and definitely the best wide receiver in the country. And then why wouldn't they have the number 1 running back recruit as well, right? Harlem Berry, the one in-state kid of the group, number 12 player in the country, super talented, is just incredible in every way. And this is quite the trio to start the cycle for LSU. I mean, you got to keep them intact, obviously, which is 90% of the battle when it comes to recruiting. But for right now, you have a remarkable trio going into next year where a lot of stuff is up in the air. So you could see a lot of young guys, including Bryce Underwood, starting very early on in their LSU careers. But let's jump into some positions because there are a lot of really, really talented guys. I will definitely not get to all of them today, but I'll try to get around to some of the big boys. So let's start with the quarterbacks, and let's start with Julian Lewis, a USC commit right now from Carrollton, Georgia, and as you can imagine, UGA is pushing as hard as possible. They are someone that is definitely someone to watch. I think USC is a little bit worried about the Bulldogs right now, but number 2 quarterback in the country, USC has just got to hold on to him. I think they lost Malachi Nelson. He wasn't necessarily the player that I think a lot of people, including myself, thought he was going to be at USC. He is now at Boise State, so you need the guy to step in. It looks like Julian Lewis could be that guy, but you got to hold off the big dogs before you can get him. So him with Lincoln Riley would be an absolute show. He would be incredible to watch, but you got to fend off UGA to do it. And then a couple of in-state kids that are going to their big schools is George McIntyre out of Brentwood, Tennessee, heading to be a Vol, at least as of right now, is locked in to be a Tennessee Volunteer. And then Taven Sinclair from Bellefonte, Ohio, heading to be a Buckeye. So both those guys deciding to stay in-state at their big-time schools, both incredibly talented and likely will start relatively early. Obviously, Nico Iamaleava over at Tennessee, and then Ohio State has Will Howard with a slew of incredible quarterbacks right behind him. So Taven Sinclair might take a little bit more time, but both very, very talented guys that I'm sure you'll be watching on Saturdays at some point soon. And then we got a couple more notable guys. Deuce Knight from Lucedale, Mississippi, a Notre Dame commit, I think number 4th in the country overall. KJ Lacey, a Texas commit from Alabama, which is very interesting because he was a teammate of a current Bama wide receiver, Ryan Williams, that just signed there and is now on campus for spring workout. So Bama will be pushing hard for KJ Lacey. There's no two ways about that. And then Madden Iamaliava, the brother of Nico, is a 4-star that is uncommitted right now. Could be going to Tennessee, but as we talked about earlier, George McIntyre is a hard guy to pass up. So it could be that someone else gets an Iamaliava on their roster. And then Decorian Moore, we talked about earlier, his teammate, Keelan Russell at Duncanville, currently an SMU recruit, but tons of guys are pushing for this kid. He has played a ton of winning football. It seems like he's going to be a little bit hard to flip from the ponies, but Florida is one of the teams that is pushing incredibly hard to get that guy's services. So let's run over to running backs now. Let's talk about the guys that will be flanking these quarterbacks possibly at the next level. We talked about Harlem Berry. He is out of this world, number 1 guy in the class. Let's talk about the number 2 and 3 guys in the class. Number 2 is Akeelan Deere. He is someone out of Mississippi, He has been crystal balled to Ole Miss. I'm sure Ole Miss will do anything to get that in-state kid on campus as quickly as possible, especially with Quinshon Judkins out the door. So you need some running back help as soon as possible. Obviously, this is a little bit down the road, but got to keep that train moving if you want the Lane Kiffin offense to keep rolling the way it has been. And then we have a Clemson commit, Gideon Davidson from Lynchburg, Virginia. Both incredibly talented. Only other top 10 running back that is committed is Anthony Rogers, who is committed to Bama. So only 3 guys committed in the top 10. 4 others have crystal balls. Those include Bo Jackson, which is an awesome name for a running back. I'd want that kid immediately. He is crystal balled to Ohio State. Jordan Davison was crystal balled to Texas. Alvin Henderson to Auburn. So tons of guys still on the board here. A couple of guys that are committed and sealed, but definitely a lot to be said in that running back class and a lot of really talented guys to choose from. But let's jump over to wide receivers. We talked about Decorian Moore. He is an absolute game changer in every way. One other top guy is actually committed, which is the number 5 guy in the class, or number 5 receiver in the class, Dallas Wilson. He is headed to Oregon, it seems. Caleb Cunningham, the number 2 guy in the wide receiver class, is kind of a battle between his home state, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State. He is a Mississippi kid, and it seems like both those schools are doing everything in their power to get his services. And with Jeff Lebby over at Mississippi State, I wouldn't necessarily count out the Bulldogs quite yet. Another guy, Jamie French, with 2 Fs at the beginning, which is very interesting, was a Bama commit up until mid-January when the coaching changes started to happen. He has taken visits to USC, Florida State, and Texas since then, so tons of teams that will be pushing for him, but Bama's still right in the thick of it for him. All of the top 5 guys here are 5 stars, tons of talent in this wide receiver class, so whoever pops up on your screen, definitely check out their highlights and check out what they did in high school, because I'm sure their numbers are just mind-boggling. But let's roll on over to tight ends. And imagine that the top tight end in the class is going to UGA, Ellis Williams from Camden County High School. They also have a commitment from Ethan Barber, the number 9 tight end in the class. So Georgia and Todd Hartley continue to do what they do best, which is just load that tight end room with talent. But the 2 guys behind Ellis Williams are Lincoln Cure and Keoti Armstrong at 2 and 3. Cure looks like he is going to be heading to Kansas State, has been crystal balled there, but I'm sure there are a ton of teams looking for his services. And Armstrong's kind of up in the air. He has scheduled visits to A&M and Texas for June, so those are 2 teams that are absolutely in it, but a lot up in the air for that guy as well. So the only other top 10 commit that is in this tight end class is James Flanagan, a 4-star out of Green Bay, Wisconsin, who is set to go to Notre Dame right now. So still a ton to figure out in this tight end class, a ton of guys that are still on the board, but right now it's UGA as always kind of dominating that tight end recruiting right now. And let's jump to O-line, where UGA is doing just fine as well. And let's start with offensive tackle. David Sanders Jr. is kind of leading the pack out of Charlotte, North Carolina, Providence Day School. Not a ton of crystal balls from him. There are a million teams that are going to be in on him, so we will definitely keep you updated with what he does. He is followed closely by Michael Fafusi, who is out of Louisville, Texas. He was recently crystal balled to Texas, but Oklahoma is battling very hard. Bill Bedenbaugh is one of the best offensive line coaches in the country, so it will definitely be a battle up until the end. But as of right now, it looks like Texas is in a very good position for him. Georgia has a couple of crystal balls for a top offensive tackles. Ohio State and Arkansas have commits from top 11 guys. This one is totally open, though. There are not a lot of guys that are outright committed. There are not a lot of guys. There are not even a lot of guys that have a ton of crystal balls. So still a ton to figure out with the offensive tackle. And then interior offensive lineman. The top guy, Solomon Thomas, is a Florida State commit. He seems locked in there. LSU and Florida both have top 7 guys, and Dylan Harper for LSU and Peyton Johnson for Florida, both committed. And then Georgia right back there with 2 top 10 guys, crystal balled to them, and Mason Short and Cortez Smith, both in-state guys, which always helps. But Georgia cleaning up on the offensive line the same way that they clean up at the tight end position, because those are the 2 positions that Georgia has proven that they are a little bit above the pack and than everyone else. Stacey Searles has done an incredible job there. But overall, this class is incredibly talented. I talked about the wide receivers, especially. Just so many names up and down that board that are incredible. I didn't even get to guys down towards the 20s like Marcus Harris, who could be total game changers the second they step on campus. So a ton of talent in this class. The quarterbacks are going to be incredible to watch. Madden Iamaliava is someone I'm watching very closely, because most likely not going to Tennessee with George McIntyre already committed there, but you never know what happens. So it'll be interesting to see what he does. Tons of guys to watch. Jamie French is a very, very interesting prospect. And then David Sanders Jr. is a game changer. Anyone that can get the top offensive tackle in the class always feels pretty good about that. So I think he's someone that will be watching very, very closely, and definitely more to happen in this recruiting cycle. As we know, things change very, very quickly in today's age. So I will keep you updated as much as possible. But obviously, as of right now, just to give you guys an idea of where we're sitting with this 2025 recruiting class, because things happen very quickly, so you want to at least know the names going into summer. So we will definitely do defense at some point, so we can jump into all the incredible defensive talent like Elijah Griffin that is on their way to the college level. But for right now, we're going to take our last break of the show. And when we come back, we're going to do a Good Vibes Monday. And it is going back to the College Football 25 well. Talking about this game just makes me happy. So we're going to go back to that well. We're going to use that again. But stick with us, and we will be right back.